The silence in the mansion was deafening. Emily huddled in the corner of the immense room, decorated with butterfly wallpaper, hugging her knees against her chest, her huge, frightened blue eyes fixed on the door as silent tears rolled down her rosy cheeks. On the other side, Michael Thompson ran his hands through his blonde hair in a gesture of despair. The businessman, accustomed to commanding a technology company valued in the billions, had never felt so powerless. "Kana miri vana tukiri." Emily's childish voice echoed down the hallway in a language that no one in that house understood. It was the Kanamari dialect, practically unknown in the world beyond the depths of the Amazon. Michael looked through the panoramic window that offered a spectacular view of the Beverly Hills area, the luxury neighborhood on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Imported cars circulated on the impeccably clean streets, while private security guards made their rounds. A completely foreign world for the girl who, until 3 weeks ago, slept in a hammock under the starry sky of the forest, lulled by birdsong and the murmur of the river. "I just want to help you," Michael murmured in English, knowing it was useless. The girl didn't understand a single word. It was at this moment of complete hopelessness that the doorbell of the mansion rang. Margaret, the housekeeper, hurried down the marble corridor and opened the main door. Sarah Collins was standing there, her red hair swaying gently in the morning breeze. She wore a long, colourful skirt, a simple cotton blouse, and carried a leather bag worn by time. Her appearance completely contrasted with the refined environment of the Thompson mansion. "Good morning, I'm Sarah Collins, the linguist," she introduced herself with a warm smile that lit up her freckled face. Michael appeared in the hall, his impeccable suit contrasting with the deep circles under his eyes. He extended his hand mechanically. "Michael Thompson, thank you for coming so quickly." Sarah felt the tension in the air as she followed the businessman down the corridor. The walls displayed contemporary artwork that certainly cost more than everything she owned. The heel of her boots echoed on the marble floor, creating an almost hypnotic rhythm. "Where is she?" asked Sarah, adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder. "In the bedroom. She hasn't been eating properly for 3 days. She won't let anyone get close," replied Michael, his normally firm voice now trembling slightly. "The doctors suggested sedation, but I refuse to do that. She's been through enough trauma." He stopped in front of a door and whispered, "It's here." Sarah took a deep breath. Years of field research in isolated tribes had taught her that first contact was crucial. What would you do at this moment? Would you quickly enter the room or wait to create a more careful approach? Michael slowly opened the door. Emily, seeing the man, pressed herself even more against the wall, her blue eyes wide with fear. "Kanwairi! Kanwairi!" the girl shouted, waving her hands as if to ward off an invisible danger. Sarah stepped forward, leaving her bag on the floor. Slowly, she sat on the carpet, keeping her distance from the child. She didn't make any movement toward Emily, didn't immediately try to speak. She just sat there, relaxed, as if she had all the time in the world. Michael watched from the door, his arms crossed in a defensive posture that tried to hide his helplessness. "We've tried everything," he whispered. Sarah gently raised her hand, asking for silence. Then, to Michael's surprise, she began to hum a soft melody, almost like birdsong. The melody had a repetitive and calm pattern. Emily's eyes widened a little more, fear giving way to a spark of curiosity. "Kanamari?" the girl finally asked, her voice small and suspicious. Sarah smiled and responded in a dialect Michael had never heard. "Tio am Kanamari wara, Sarah I wahinim." Emily's face lit up in recognition and relief. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she began to speak rapidly in her dialect. Sarah listened attentively, occasionally responding in short phrases in the same language. Michael remained paralyzed at the door, witnessing what seemed like a miracle. After a few minutes of conversation, Sarah turned to Michael. She's hungry and misses the smell of the forest. She says the lights here hurt her eyes, and she misses sleeping under the stars. Michael swallowed hard. How do you... how do you know how to talk to her? Sarah smiled, her green eyes shining. I don't speak fluently, but I spent 2 years with the Kanamari documenting their language for my doctoral thesis. It's one of the last dialects of the Katukina language family, with fewer than 500 speakers in the world. Emily looked at Sarah and said something, pointing to Michael. She wants to know why the Skyman brought her to this cold stone cave, Sarah translated. Michael frowned. Skyman. For her, helicopters are giant birds sent by the gods. She thinks you're some kind of spiritual entity that took her away from her family, Sarah explained, maintaining a calm tone. Michael ran his hands over his face. How to explain to a 7-year-old child that she didn't belong to that tribe? That her real parents had died in a plane crash? That she was, in fact, Emily Thompson, the daughter of Europeans, and not Kaya, as they called her in the village? Sarah observed the conflict on the businessman's face. This is going to take time, she said softly. Building a bridge between such different worlds doesn't happen in a day. Emily said a few more words, and Sarah nodded. She's hungry, but she doesn't like the food here. She says it's lifeless. Michael immediately perked up. Ask her what she wants to eat. I can send for anything. Sarah spoke briefly with Emily before turning to Michael. She misses fresh cassava, fish grilled on banana leaves, and fruits picked directly from the trees. For the first time in 3 weeks, Michael felt a glimmer of hope. I'll call the chef right away. While Michael left to arrange the meal, Sarah continued her conversation with Emily. The girl began to visibly relax, occasionally even showing a small smile. This scene marked the beginning of an extraordinary journey that would forever transform 3 lives. A linguist passionate about preserving endangered languages, a businessman determined to create a home for a child lost between worlds, and a girl trying to understand where she truly belonged. What would you do if, like Sarah, you had the responsibility of translating not just words, but entire cultures? Could you help Emily adapt without losing her identity? And how would you react as you found yourself increasingly involved with the Thompson family? 3 months before the confrontation at the Beverly Hills mansion, Sarah Collins was waiting in the imposing lobby of the Thompson Tech headquarters. Her hands firmly held the folder with her resume and academic publications. Her red hair was tied in an improvised bun, an attempt to look more professional for that unexpected interview. As she watched suit-clad executives hurriedly passing through the marble and glass lobby, Sarah wondered what she was doing there. The email she had received was vague, a job offer related to her specialty in endangered Indigenous languages. The salary offered was exorbitant, something her research grant at UCLA could never match. Dr. Collins, an impeccably looking secretary approached. Mr. Thompson will see you now. Sarah was led through a maze of corridors to a meeting room with a panoramic view of downtown Los Angeles. The urban landscape of LA stretched out in a horizon of skyscrapers. In the center of the room, a dark wooden table housed only one man with his back to the door, observing the city. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Collins," said Michael Thompson without turning. His voice had the firmness of someone accustomed to command. When he finally turned, Sarah immediately noticed the intense blue eyes, the perfectly cut blonde hair, and the suit that certainly cost more than her annual rent. Michael Thompson was exactly how business magazines portrayed him, imposing, intimidating, and absurdly young for someone who commanded a technological empire at 35. "Please, sit down," he indicated, studying her with curiosity. "I hope the sudden invitation wasn't an inconvenience." Sarah adjusted herself in the chair, aware that her floral skirt and simple blouse contrasted with the formality of the environment. "I confess I was intrigued. It's not every day that a linguist specializing in endangered languages receives a proposal from Thompson Tech. A slight smile appeared on the businessman's usually serious face. Our interests are more diverse than what the newspapers report. He slid a folder across the table. What do you know about the Kanamari dialect of the Western Amazon? Sarah felt a thrill of excitement. This was her specialty. It's fascinating. It belongs to the Katukina language family, with fewer than 500 speakers still alive. I spent 2 years living with them for my doctoral thesis. And you can converse in this language? I'm not fluent, but I can communicate at basic and intermediate levels. It's a complex language, with unique syntactic structures and a tonal system that... Michael gently interrupted her. I need someone who can serve as a translator. It's a personal matter. It was then that Michael revealed Emily's story. Sarah listened attentively as he narrated how he had discovered the blonde girl living among the indigenous people during a philanthropic expedition to the Amazon. At first, I thought it was some kind of regional legend, explained Michael, his voice taking on a softer tone. A blue-eyed, golden-haired child living among the natives. When I saw her in person, he stopped, as if words failed him. What did you feel? Asked Sarah, genuinely curious. Michael hesitated, unaccustomed to sharing emotions. It was like looking in a mirror and seeing a reflection of something that could have been. He stood up, walking to the window. It took me months to track down the plane crash, confirm that it was the daughter of the European Thompsons, a distant branch of my family. More months to navigate the adoption bureaucracy, convince anthropologists and authorities that my intentions were genuine. Sarah observed the businessman's tense posture. And now you have a daughter who doesn't speak your language. Exactly. Michael turned to her. I'm offering a 1-year contract with the possibility of extension. Accommodation in my residence, since you'll need to be available daily. The salary will be 5 times what you receive at the university, plus a considerable bonus if you can establish effective communication. The proposal was tempting, but Sarah hesitated. Mr. Thompson, translating is not just a technical matter of words. We're talking about completely different cultures. The girl hasn't just lost her original language, she's gained an entirely different worldview during these years with the Kanamari. I'm aware of that, Michael replied, crossing his arms. That's exactly why I need someone with your anthropological background, not just a conventional translator. Sarah bit her lip, thoughtful. Her academic research could wait, and the opportunity to work so closely with a Kanamari dialect speaker was unique. Besides, there was something about that child's story that deeply touched her heart. When do I start? She finally asked. Michael allowed himself a genuine smile. Emily will arrive in 2 weeks. I'd like you to be already installed in the mansion before that. That's how Sarah Collins, daughter of teachers from the outskirts of Boston, a dedicated scholar who had won scholarships on her own merit, suddenly found herself immersed in the world of the American elite. The adaptation wasn't easy. The Beverly Hills mansion, with its 20,000 square feet, Olympic pool, and gardens worthy of a palace, seemed like a different planet compared to the small apartment Sarah shared with 2 colleagues in Venice Beach. The house staff observed her with curiosity, the simple woman with colorful clothes and a typical East Coast accent, who, for some reason, had received VIP treatment from the boss. Michael spent most of his time in the office, returning late and leaving early. In the rare moments when they met, he bombarded Sarah with questions about the Kanamari. How do they educate their children? What kind of games do they have? Will Emily have a notion of the concept of private property? How do you explain the internet to someone who has never seen a computer? Sarah noticed the businessman's growing anxiety. You're nervous, she commented one night as they dined in the immense dining room. Michael, surprised by the direct observation, adjusted his tie. In an automatic gesture, I'm not accustomed to failing, Dr. Collins. Sarah, please, and this isn't a business acquisition or a product launch. It's a child. That's precisely why the margin for error is zero, he replied, serving himself wine. In the company, a mistake means financial loss. Here, it means harming a life. Sarah studied the man in front of her. Behind the facade of the ruthless CEO, there was a vulnerability that he rarely let show. Why did you decide to adopt her? Really? Michael remained silent for so long that Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. My parents died when I was 16, he finally said. Car accident. I was raised by an uncle who saw in me only the future president of the family company. No one really saw me as a child. He met Sarah's green eyes. When I discovered Emily, I felt that I could offer her what I didn't have, a second chance to have a real family. That unexpected confession changed the way Sarah saw Michael. He wasn't just an eccentric billionaire fulfilling some kind of philanthropic mission. There was a genuine emotional wound motivating his actions. On the morning Emily would arrive, the mansion was buzzing with activity. Michael had hired pediatricians, child psychologists, and even a specialist in cultural trauma. Sarah observed the preparations with growing concern. You're scaring the child before she even arrives, she commented, as Michael checked the room prepared for Emily for the 10th time. I want everything to be perfect, he replied, adjusting a teddy bear on the shelf. Perfection is not what she needs right now. She needs patience, understanding, and space to mourn what she has lost. Michael frowned. She hasn't lost anything. She's returning to the world to which she belongs. Sarah shook her head. From her perspective, she's lost her family, her community, her traditions, everything she knew as home. She gently placed her hand on his arm. If you ignore that, you'll never earn her trust. Before Michael could respond, the intercom rang. The helicopter had landed on the property's helipad. Emily Thompson had finally arrived at her new home. The first meeting was disastrous. The girl, dressed in Western clothes that seemed uncomfortable on her small body, screamed and cried in Kanamari. The hired specialists tried to calm her with modern psychological approaches, only to be met with even more despair. Michael, completely lost, tried to offer expensive toys and treats. Without success. Sarah observed from a distance, her heart breaking at the child's evident suffering. Give her space, Sarah finally intervened, pushing away the specialists. All of you, get out. But the protocols indicate, the psychologist began. Forget the protocols, she's terrified. Michael, recognizing the determination in Sarah's gaze, asked everyone to leave. In the days that followed, Emily refused to eat properly, to sleep in her bed, or to interact with anyone. Huddled in the corner of the room, she murmured Kanamari songs through tears. It was then that we reached the critical moment, the confrontation with which we began our story, when Sarah finally managed to establish the first real contact with Emily. What would you do if, like Michael, you suddenly found yourself responsible for a child who had lived a completely different life from yours? Could you find the patience to build a relationship from scratch, even with all the cultural and linguistic barriers? The first week after the initial contact between Sarah and Emily brought small progress. The girl began to accept food, especially after the mansion's chef, following Sarah's instructions, prepared dishes that resembled Kanamari cuisine. Fish grilled on banana leaves, cassava porridge, fresh tropical fruits. Michael observed with a mixture of fascination and frustration the interactions between Sarah and Emily. As much as he tried to participate, his presence still caused discomfort for the girl. Every night in his private office, he asked Sarah for a detailed report on the day's advances. Did she say anything about her past, about her biological parents? Asked Michael as he served 2 glasses of wine on a particularly cold winter night in Los Angeles. Sarah settled into the leather armchair, accepting the drink. It doesn't work like that. I can't simply ask about traumatic memories to a child who barely trusts me. But it's been a week, insisted Michael, the impatience typical of a businessman accustomed to quick results showing in his voice. Sarah smiled gently. For someone who built an empire, you show surprising lack of patience with things that really matter. Michael raised his eyebrows, unaccustomed to being contradicted so directly. For a moment he seemed ready for a harsh response, but then his shoulders relaxed and a tired smile appeared on his face. Touché, he conceded, sitting in the opposite armchair. I guess I've spent too much time in a world where everything can be accelerated with enough money. Some things can't be bought or rushed, Michael, replied Sarah, using his first name without realizing it. Trust is one of them. Cultural adaptation is another. There was a moment of comfortable silence between them. Michael observed the fire in the fireplace, lost in thoughts. What was it like? He finally asked. The Kanamari village. How did Emily, or Kaya as they called her, live there? Sarah's face lit up with the memory. Imagine waking up with the sunrise, not by an alarm clock but by bird song. The river as your first sight of the day, the forest breathing around you. Kanamari children have a freedom that would be unthinkable in our cities. They explore, play, learn through observation. Sarah continued describing the daily life of the tribe, how children accompanied adults in fishing, how they learned to identify medicinal plants, how they listened to elders tell stories around the fire. For Emily, that was normal. It was her world, concluded Sarah, and now everything is strange, noisy, artificial. Michael absorbed every word, trying to imagine his adoptive daughter in that environment so different from his own. Was she happy there? He asked in a low voice. Very, Sarah answered honestly. The Kanamari considered her a gift from the gods. She was loved, protected, respected for her unique qualities. A flash of sadness crossed Michael's face. And I tore her away from this paradise. You brought her back to the world to which she originally belonged, Sarah gently corrected. You're neither villain nor hero in this story, Michael. You're just someone trying to do what you believe is right. The next morning, Sarah had an idea. She asked Michael to provide tropical plants for Emily's room and a hammock to temporarily replace the bed that the girl refused to use. The businessman, now aware of the need for gradual adaptation, readily agreed. When Emily saw the transformation in her room, her blue eyes widened in surprise. For the first time since her arrival, a genuine smile lit up her face. She ran to the hammock and swung in it, speaking excitedly in Kanamari. She's thanking you, Sarah translated for Michael, who was watching from the door. She says now she can sleep as the forest spirits want. That small victory paved the way for others. Sarah began teaching English words to Emily using everyday objects. At the same time, she taught basic expressions in Kanamari to Michael, creating a common vocabulary between father and daughter. Emily likes to draw, commented Michael one afternoon, as the three were in the garden. The girl was concentrating on a sketchbook, representing with childish strokes the forest of her memories. She still identifies as Kaya, explained Sarah. We can't simply erase her Kanamari identity. The challenge is to help her integrate who she was, therewith, who she can be here. Michael nodded, observing his daughter with a new, "Look, how can I help?" "Ask her about her drawings," suggested Sarah. "In Kanamari, use the expressions I taught you." With visible hesitation, Michael approached Emily and squatted beside her. Wa mimi puuk. His words came out awkwardly, the pronunciation far from perfect. Emily looked at him, surprised to hear her language coming from the Sky Man. A small smile appeared on her lips, and she began to explain her drawing, pointing to the elements: trees, river, forest animals. Michael didn't understand the words, but he smiled and nodded, completely absorbed in the first moment of real connection with his daughter. Sarah observed the scene with her heart tight with emotion. It was a small step, but significant. In the following weeks, Sarah established a routine that created bridges between Emily's two worlds. In the morning, she taught English through games and playful activities. In the afternoon, she allowed Emily to practice skills she had learned in the village. Identifying plants, braiding natural fibers, singing traditional songs. Michael often joined them when his work allowed. The biggest breakthrough came when Sarah suggested a trip to the Los Angeles Botanical Garden. Emily, who felt suffocated inside the mansion, was delighted to find herself in an environment that, although controlled, somewhat resembled the exuberance of the Amazon. "Look how different she is here," commented Sarah as they watched Emily running among the trees, touching leaves and trunks with childish curiosity. Michael, who had set aside his suit and tie to wear jeans and a t-shirt on that Sunday outing, nodded. "It's the first time I've seen her truly happy since she arrived." Sarah hesitated before saying what she was thinking. Maybe this mansion in Beverly Hills isn't the ideal place for her right now. It's too artificial, too isolated. Michael frowned. "Are you suggesting that I move?" "I'm suggesting that you consider options," Sarah replied carefully. "Maybe a house with more contact with nature. You have that property in Malibu, don't you? With a lake, preserved forest." Michael seemed to consider the idea, watching Emily, who was now crouching to examine some ants on the path. "I never thought my life would change so completely because of a child," he commented with a slight smile. "Children have that power," replied Sarah. "They force us to rethink priorities." The two were silent for a moment, watching Emily, who was now animatedly talking to an elderly gardener. The man didn't understand her words, but smiled and nodded, clearly enchanted by the girl's energy. "She manages to communicate even when they don't speak her language," observed Michael. "It's a rare talent." "It's authenticity," corrected Sarah. "Something many adults have lost." Michael turned to face Sarah, his intense blue eyes. "I thank you for that, for helping me see beyond my own limitations." The moment was interrupted by Emily, who ran up to them holding a vibrant, tropical flower, speaking excitedly in a mixture of Kanamari and some English words she had learned. Sarah translated, laughing. "She says she found a magic flower that can make you smile more because you're too serious and need more joy in your life." Michael accepted the flower with ceremonial seriousness, placing it in his shirt pocket. "Tell her I'll keep it always to remember to smile." When Sarah translated, Emily laughed and, in a spontaneous gesture, took her adoptive father's hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact with Michael. The businessman froze for a second, clearly moved, before gently squeezing the small hand in return. That night, as they returned home in the chauffeured car, Emily fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted after a day of discoveries. Michael watched his daughter sleeping, her face softened by sleep. "I've made a decision," he said softly to Sarah. "We're going to Malibu next weekend. If she likes it, we can consider spending more time there." Sarah smiled, feeling that they were finally on the right track. "It's a great start." During the journey, Michael received a business call and began to discuss business in a low voice. Sarah noticed how his posture changed completely when he entered CEO mode. The firmer voice, the technical vocabulary, the quick and assertive decisions. It was as if two people inhabited the same body. What would you do in Sarah's place? Would you continue focusing only on Emily's adaptation, or try to help Michael find a better balance between his professional and personal life? And how would you react when realizing that your feelings for the businessman were beginning to exceed the professional relationship? The property in Malibu was a revelation. Located about 30 miles from Los Angeles, Michael's estate occupied an area of environmental preservation with untouched coast, a crystal-clear lake, and lush gardens. The main house, although luxurious, had been built with natural materials, reclaimed wood, local stones, and large windows that framed the landscape. When they arrived after an hour's journey, Emily was initially apprehensive. The car stopped in front of the country house, and Michael opened the door for his daughter. The girl stepped out hesitantly, looking around with caution. It was then that she heard it, the birdsong, the sound of the wind in the leaves, the distant murmur of running water. Her face lit up instantly. "Ajowara," she exclaimed, pointing to the forest. "She says the spirits of nature are here too," translated Sarah, smiling at Michael. Emily began to run around the property, stopping to examine plants, follow butterflies, and touch the lake water with her fingers. For the first time since her arrival in the United States, she seemed truly at ease. "I think we've found our point of balance," commented Michael, watching his daughter with a smile that he rarely displayed in his corporate environment. That weekend, Emily flourished. Michael cancelled all his work calls, something unprecedented, to dedicate himself entirely to getting to know his daughter. With Sarah's help as a translator, he learned that Emily loved to swim, had a natural talent for identifying birds by their song, and adored stories about the moon and stars. On Sunday night, sitting around a small fire that Michael had lit in the garden, following Sarah's precise instructions on how to create a familiar environment for Emily, the girl surprised everyone by pronouncing her first complete sentence in English. "I want to stay here." Michael looked at Sarah, seeking confirmation that he had understood correctly. The linguist nodded, equally surprised by the progress. "You want to live here, Emily?" Michael asked carefully, using simple words. The girl nodded vigorously, pointing to the forest, the lake, and then to Michael and Sarah. "Family. Here." That word, family, hit Michael and Sarah in different, but equally profound ways. For him, it was confirmation that he was finally building the connection he so desired with his adoptive daughter. For Sarah, it was a painful reminder that her role was temporary. She was a hired employee, not part of that forming family. The next morning, as they prepared to return to Los Angeles, Michael surprised everyone with an announcement. "I've decided that we'll spend more time here," he declared during breakfast on the veranda overlooking the lake. "I'll go to Los Angeles only 3 days a week for essential meetings. The rest of the time, I'll work remotely from here." Sarah almost dropped her coffee cup. "Seriously, you can do that?" Michael smiled. "I'm the CEO. I can reorganize the schedule as I prefer." His gaze moved to Emily, who was playing with a beetle in the corner of the veranda. Some things are more important than acquisitions and quarterly reports. The following months established a new normality for the trio. During the days when Michael needed to be in the city, Emily and Sarah remained in Malibu, where the girl made remarkable progress both in learning English and in adapting to the new culture. Sarah developed a teaching method that incorporated elements of the Kanamari tradition, learning through observation, storytelling, and connection with nature to introduce Western concepts. Emily learned mathematics by counting seeds and fruits, sciences by observing the water cycle in the lake, and English through stories that Sarah created especially for her. The relationship between Michael and Emily also flourished. The businessman, who previously could barely manage his own schedule, now organized his time around his daughter. He patiently learned phrases in Kanamari, participated in the educational activities that Sarah planned, and on the nights he was in Malibu, told stories to Emily before bed. A curious mixture of business tales adapted for a 7-year-old girl. And then the brave little company managed to defeat the big bad company because it had better and more creative ideas. He concluded one of these stories, while Emily listened fascinated in her hammock, now permanently installed in her room. "You're not exactly impartial in these tales," commented Sarah with a smile after Emily fell asleep. The two walked through the garden illuminated by solar lanterns, sharing a bottle of wine. Michael laughed softly. "I'm reformulating my own narrative, I suppose. In the official version, I'm the ruthless CEO of the big corporation. Here, I can be the hero of the small ideas." They reached the edge of the lake, where the full moon reflected perfectly in the still water. Michael sat on a rustic bench, inviting Sarah to join him. "You know what's strange?" he commented, looking at the stars. "I've been thinking a lot about identity lately. Emily is integrating two cultures, two versions of herself. I realize that I'm doing the same." Sarah watched him attentively. The Michael she had met 3 months ago, formal, distant, meticulously controlled, had given way to a more relaxed and reflective version. He wore jeans frequently now, let his beard grow on weekends, and occasionally allowed his blonde hair to be tousled by the wind. "I believe we are always many people at the same time," replied Sarah. "The trick is not to let one version completely dominate the others." Michael turned to face her, his blue eyes intense even in the soft light of the night. "You've changed my life, you know, not just because of Emily, but for making me question things that I accepted as immutable." Sarah felt her heart race, aware of the proximity between them on that bench. "I was just doing my job." "No," Michael disagreed softly. "Your job was to translate a language. You did much more. You translated entire worlds for me." Before Sarah could respond, her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from her advisor at the university, reminding her about the deadline for publication of her next academic article, a commitment she had been neglecting amid her new responsibilities. The message served as an uncomfortable reminder of the temporality of her situation. As emotionally involved as she was with the Thompsons, her contract had an end date, and the more Emily advanced in English, the less necessary Sarah became. "Something wrong?" asked Michael, noticing her worried expression. Sarah forced a smile. "Nothing important, just pending academic matters." Michael nodded, although his eyes suggested that he perceived there was more to the story. They finished the wine in a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts under the starry sky of Malibu. The following week, while Michael was in Los Angeles for a series of important meetings, Sarah decided to take Emily to visit the Santa Monica Farmers Market, a smaller and less touristy version of the famous Pike Place Market in Seattle. The girl was excited to explore the colors, smells, and exotic flavors that the place offered. The outing started peacefully. Emily, now more confident with some basic phrases in English, enchanted the vendors with her peculiar accent and curious eyes. Sarah used the opportunity to teach her about American fruits, letting the girl try persimmons, papayas, and other delicacies that, surprisingly, she had never tasted even living in the forest. It was when they passed by the fish section that the problem began. A freelance photographer, recognizing Emily from the occasional articles that appeared in the press about the wild heiress of the Thompsons, began taking photos without permission. Sarah immediately noticed and positioned herself between the camera and the girl. "Please stop. She's a child," she firmly requested. The photographer ignored the request. "It's a public space. I have the right to photograph." Emily, sensing the tension, began to get agitated. She clung to Sarah's skirt, hiding her face. The situation worsened when more people recognized the forest girl and began to gather, some trying to film with cell phones. "Kaya wiri tukana!" shouted Emily, reverting to Kanamari in her stress, asking to leave. Sarah picked her up and tried to leave quickly, but the crowd had already partially blocked her passage, too curious to give space. It was then that a market security guard, noticing the problem, came to her aid. "Any problem, ma'am?" he asked, strategically positioning himself to create a barrier. "We need to leave, discreetly. This is Emily Thompson, And we're being harassed by photographers, Sarah quickly explained. The name Thompson worked like magic. The security guard immediately went into action, calling 2 colleagues on the radio and creating a corridor so that Sarah and Emily could reach the exit. Even so, some photos were taken, and Sarah knew they would probably appear on gossip sites and social networks in the next few hours. Emily trembled in her arms, clearly traumatized by the experience. In the taxi on the way home, she huddled in the seat, refusing to look out the window. "Bad people," she murmured in English. "Don't like city." Sarah immediately called Michael, explaining what had happened. In less than an hour, the company helicopter landed at a nearby heliport to take them back to Malibu, away from urban tumult. Michael arrived at the estate at the end of that day, clearly concerned. Emily was already sleeping, exhausted by the stress. Sarah was waiting for him in the living room, still shaken by the incident. "How is she?" was his first question, without even taking off his jacket. "Physically fine, but scared," replied Sarah. "It was my fault. I should have anticipated the media interest." Michael shook his head, pouring himself a whiskey. "It's not your fault. I should have provided security for you." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that Sarah already recognized as a sign of his frustration. "The problem will get worse. The newspapers have been speculating about the wild girl for weeks. Now they'll have photos." Sarah felt a shiver of concern. "What can we do?" Michael considered the question for a moment. "Maybe it's time to control the narrative. Give an exclusive interview on our terms with a respectable journalist." "We can't expose Emily that way," protested Sarah. "She's barely adapting to normal life, let alone cameras and interviewers." "We don't need to include her directly," argued Michael. "Just tell her story respectfully so people understand the importance of giving her space." Sarah didn't seem convinced. "What if it only increases interest?" Michael sighed, recognizing the complexity of the situation. "It's a risk, yes, but silence has its price too." The next morning, Emily woke up still upset, but the familiar natural environment of Malibu helped calm her. Michael decided to postpone any decision about the media to focus on his daughter's immediate well-being. He spent the entire day with her, fishing in the lake, identifying birds, and helping her plant some fruit tree seedlings in the orchard, activities that reminded her of positive aspects of her life in the village. Sarah observed the interaction between father and daughter with a mixture of admiration and melancholy. The connection between them had incredibly strengthened in recent months. Emily now called Michael Dad or Daddy, sometimes mixing with Ba'awa, the Kanamari term for a father figure. They had even developed some inside jokes and games that needed no translation. "You're quiet today," commented Michael after Emily went to bed. They were sitting on the veranda, as had become customary on nights in Malibu. Sarah smiled weakly. "Just thinking." "About the future," she answered honestly. "Emily is progressing rapidly. Soon she'll speak English fluently." Michael studied her carefully. "And that means your work will be done." Sarah nodded, unable to find words to express all the conflicting emotions she felt. Michael remained silent for a long moment, contemplating the night landscape. "You know," he finally said, "technically, I hired you to be a language translator. But what you've really been doing is translating worlds. The Kanamari world for Emily, her world for me, even parts of myself that I had forgotten." Sarah felt her eyes moisten with unexpected tears. "I don't want this to end when Emily learns English," continued Michael, his voice acquiring a rare vulnerability. "I want you to continue being part of our lives. My life." Sarah's heart raced. "What are you saying exactly?" Michael turned to face her, his expression serious. "I'm saying that my feelings for you went far beyond the professional realm long ago. I'm saying that I can't imagine our life, mine and Emily's, without you in it." The moment was interrupted by the sound of light footsteps. Emily was standing at the door of the veranda, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Nightmare," she murmured in English. Michael and Sarah exchanged a look. Their conversation would have to wait. Like a perfectly synchronized duo, they both stood up to comfort the girl. What would you do in Sarah's place? Would you accept this new role in the Thompsons' lives, possibly developing a relationship with Michael? Or would you maintain professional distance, fearing to further complicate Emily's adaptation? The exclusive interview ended up happening, but not in the way Michael had originally planned. After a week of negotiations with different outlets, he chose respected journalist Christine Winters from Profile magazine, known for her ethical and sensitive approach in cases involving children. The main condition: Emily would not participate directly, would not be photographed, and her privacy would be prioritized. The article would focus on the challenges of cultural adaptation and the importance of preserving endangered Indigenous languages. Sarah was nervous on the morning of the interview. She wore a simple green dress, her red hair tied in an unpretentious bun. Michael, in contrast, was in his element. Tailored suit, perfectly groomed hair, the confident posture of someone who mastered the art of public communication. "Relax," he murmured, as they waited for the journalist in the main room of the Malibu house. "You're the expert here. I just talk about numbers and corporate strategies." Christine arrived punctually, accompanied only by a photographer. After the initial introductions, the interview began smoothly, with questions about Sarah's academic work and her experience with the Kanamari. "What impressed you most about Emily's adaptation?" asked Christine, after Sarah explained the linguistic context of the tribe. Sarah thought carefully before answering. "Her resilience. Imagine being torn from the only world you know, where you were perfectly adapted and loved, to a completely alien environment. The ability children have to adjust is extraordinary, but we must also respect the inherent trauma in this transition." The journalist nodded, taking notes, before turning to Michael. "And for you, as CEO of Thompson Tech, how was it adjusting your own life to accommodate a child with such specific needs?" Michael surprised Sarah with his honest answer. "It was the hardest and most rewarding thing I've ever done. In the corporate world, we're used to quick results, clear metrics, problems that can be solved with sufficient resources. Emily taught me that some things can't be accelerated or bought. I've learned more about patience and adaptability in the last 6 months than in my entire career." The interview flowed naturally for 2 hours. Michael talked about Emily's European origins, the plane crash that killed her biological parents, and how he, being a distant relative, felt responsible for her after discovering her existence in the Amazon. Sarah complimented with explanations about the delicate process of cultural reintegration. It was when Christine approached an unexpected angle. "You two make an impressive team. Is there any possibility of this professional partnership evolving into something more personal?" The silence that followed was revealing. Michael and Sarah exchanged a quick glance, both momentarily disarmed by the direct question. "Our absolute priority is Emily's well-being," Michael finally answered, without really answering the question. "Any personal decision would be secondary to that." Sarah nodded in agreement, but her flushed face suggested there was more to the story. The interview ended soon after, with Christine thanking them for the exclusive and promising to send a preliminary version of the article for approval before publication. When the journalist left, Michael and Sarah found themselves alone in the room, the silence laden with unspoken words. "I think we should talk about that night on the veranda," Sarah finally said, "before it appears in a national magazine." Michael agreed, suggesting a walk around the property. As they walked along the path that circled the lake, he finally addressed the subject that had been hovering between them. "I don't take back anything I said. My feelings for you are real, Sarah, but I completely understand if you don't share them. Or if you think it would complicate your professional position. Sarah stopped walking, turning to face him. What I feel for you and for Emily has gone far beyond professional for months. But I'm afraid. Of what? That it might hurt Emily. She's already been through. So many changes, so many losses. What if it doesn't work out between us? It would be another rupture in her life. Michael considered the word seriously. It's a risk, yes. But I also think about the opposite. What if it works? Emily would have not just a father, but a mother who already knows and loves her. A complete family. The concept hung between them. Family. Something that Sarah, dedicated to a wandering academic career, had never prioritized. Something that Michael, immersed in the corporate world, had given up seeking after failed relationships with women attracted more by his fortune than by who he really was. We need to go slow, decided Sarah. For Emily. Michael smiled, gently taking her hand. For all of us. The Profile magazine article was published 2 weeks later, with the title, Between Worlds, The Extraordinary Journey of Emily Thompson from the Amazon to the Los Angeles Elite. The approach was respectful, educational, focusing on the cultural and linguistic aspects of adaptation without sensationalism. Christine had kept her word. There were no photos of Emily, only general images of the property in Malibu, professional portraits of Michael and Sarah, separately, and artistic illustrations representing Kanamari life in the Amazon. The final text subtly included the evident chemistry between the businessman and the linguist, describing them as extraordinarily synchronized in their approach, complementing each other in ways that suggest a connection that transcends the merely professional. The repercussion was largely positive. Anthropologists, linguists, and specialists in Indigenous rights praised the cultural sensitivity demonstrated. Emily's story inspired donations to programs for the preservation of endangered Indigenous languages, and Thompson Tech announced the creation of a foundation dedicated to the cause, which would be led by Sarah. In the privacy of Malibu, a new dynamic was established. Sarah gradually transferred her belongings to the house, occupying a separate room, but spending increasingly more time with Michael and Emily as a family unit. For the girl, the transition seemed natural. Sarah was already a constant and loved presence in her life. One afternoon, about 8 months after Emily's arrival in the United States, the girl surprised everyone during a picnic by the lake. "I want to learn to write Kanamari," she declared in fluent English, still with a slight accent. "So I don't forget." Sarah and Michael exchanged surprised looks. "Is it possible?" asked Michael. "Does Kanamari have a written form?" "Technically, yes," replied Sarah. "Linguists have developed a writing system based on the Latin alphabet, but it's rarely used by the Kanamari themselves, whose tradition is predominantly oral." Emily looked at both expectantly, her blue eyes determined. "I want to write stories, in English and Kanamari, for people to know my two worlds." Sarah felt tears forming. It was the first clear sign that Emily was not just accepting her new reality, but finding a way to integrate her dual identities, no longer choosing between being Kaya or Emily, but recognizing herself as both. "I think that's a wonderful idea," said Michael, clearly moved. "Maybe we can publish these stories someday." That night, while Emily slept, Michael found Sarah in the house library, researching materials on writing systems for predominantly oral languages. "She's finally finding her place," commented Michael, sitting next to Sarah on the sofa. Sarah nodded, closing the book she was consulting. "It's extraordinary how children can integrate seemingly contradictory experiences. Adults tend to see the world in exclusive categories. You are this or are that. Children intuitively understand that they can be this and that." Michael smiled, putting his arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Speaking of integrating experiences, I've been thinking about us, about the future. Sarah's heart accelerated. In the last 2 months, her relationship with Michael had evolved naturally, with respect for the space and time that Emily needed to adjust. They were careful with displays of affection in front of the girl, but honest when she asked if Sarah and Daddy liked each other. "And what did you conclude, Mr. Thompson?" asked Sarah with a slight smile. Michael adjusted himself on the sofa, suddenly seeming nervous, a rarity for the confident CEO. "I concluded that we need to make this official. For Emily, for us. Sarah Collins, would you accept—" The library door opened before he could finish the sentence. Emily was standing there in her dinosaur pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Can't sleep," she murmured. "Can I stay with you?" Michael and Sarah exchanged a look that mixed amusement and frustration at the interrupted moment. "Of course you can, dear," replied Sarah, making space between them on the sofa. Emily nestled comfortably, sighing with contentment as she found herself between the two adults who had become her new center of safety. In minutes, she fell into a deep sleep. "Seems like the universe is telling us to be patient," whispered Michael, smiling over his sleeping daughter's head. Sarah nodded, her hand finding Michael's over Emily's shoulder. "Some things are worth waiting for. What would you do if you were in their place? How would you balance forming a new family with respect for the time and space that a child like Emily needs? And how would you handle external pressures from the media, society, extended family on this unconventional union?" 1 year after Emily's arrival in the United States, the Malibu estate was decorated for a special occasion. Colorful lanterns hung from the trees, rustic tables had been arranged around the garden, and a small improvised altar near the lake reflected the golden sunset. It was the day of Michael and Sarah's wedding. The ceremony had been carefully planned to integrate meaningful elements from all the worlds that intertwined in the family's story. The celebrant was a justice of the peace who would conduct the civil part, but also present were a Kanamari shaman whom Emily had insisted on inviting, and the priest who had baptized Michael in childhood. The guests were few and carefully selected: Sarah's academic colleagues, some of Michael's closest executives, and friends who had demonstrated respect for the family's privacy during the turbulent process of Emily's adaptation. In the main house, Sarah was finishing getting ready. She had opted for a simple dress of natural silk in an ivory tone, without the traditional excesses of wedding dresses. Her red hair was partially loose, adorned only with small wildflowers. "You look beautiful," said Emily, who watched fascinated from the bedroom door. The girl, now 8 years old, wore a sky-blue dress that enhanced her eyes. Her blonde hair was braided with colorful ribbons, a mixture of Western aesthetics and adornments. Inspired by the Kanamari, Sarah smiled at her future official daughter. "And you look stunning, little one." "Can I call you Mom after the ceremony?" asked Emily, approaching timidly. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "You can call me whatever you prefer, dear. I'll be your mother in heart regardless of the name you use." Emily considered this with the seriousness she often demonstrated. "In the village, I had 2 mothers, the one who gave me milk when I arrived, and the one who taught me to braid and sing. Here I have you." She smiled. "I think Mum is good." Outside, guests were beginning to gather near the altar. Michael waited nervously, unable to stand still. He had abandoned the traditional suit in favor of a white linen shirt and light pants, much more in keeping with the natural environment that had become his true home in the past year. The ceremony began at sunset. Sarah walked to the altar accompanied by Emily, who had insisted on escorting the bride instead of just carrying flowers. Together, mother and daughter in formation, they followed the path dotted with petals and lanterns. The vows were exchanged in 3 languages: English, Spanish, in respect to Sarah's mother's heritage, and Kanamari, with Emily proudly serving as translator for the last part. It was a perfect symbolic demonstration of the integration of worlds that had defined the journey of that unusual family. During the celebration that followed, Emily surprised everyone with a special Gift for the newlyweds, a small handcrafted book she had created with the help of her private tutor. On the hand-colored pages, the girl had written a story in English and Kanamari, illustrated with her own drawings. "It's called The Girl of Two Worlds," she explained shyly as she delivered the gift. "It's our story." Michael flipped through the pages with Sarah, both moved to see how Emily had represented her journey. The plane crash, the years in the village, the arrival of the Sky Man, the initial fear in the stone house, and finally the formation of her new family in Malibu, where the spirits of the forest and the city could coexist in harmony. The last page showed a simple but moving drawing. 3 figures holding hands. A tall one with yellow hair, a medium one with red hair, and a small one with yellow hair like the first. All smiling under a sky where both the sun and the moon shone. "That's us," Emily explained, pointing to the drawing. "In the place where all worlds meet." Sarah hugged the girl, unable to contain her tears. Michael joined the embrace, forming a perfect circle that symbolized the union they had built against all odds. 3 years passed since that day. The Thompson-Collins family, as they now officially called themselves, found their own balance between the multiple worlds they inhabited. Michael continued to run Thompson Tech, but with a new work philosophy that prioritized the balance between personal and professional life. An example that inspired changes throughout the corporate culture of the company. The company now invested substantially in cultural and linguistic preservation projects of Indigenous peoples, with a foundation chaired by Sarah. Sarah divided her time between directing the Thompson Foundation for Linguistic Preservation and her academic work, now focused on documenting the cultural transition of children between radically different worlds. Her book about the experience with Emily, published with careful filters to protect the girl's privacy, became a reference in anthropology and psychology colleges around the world. Emily, now 11 years old, attended an international school where she could practice multiple languages. Fluent in English, Spanish, and Kanamari, she demonstrated an extraordinary talent for linguistics, often helping her mother in preservation projects. Her greatest pride was the exchange program she had helped create, allowing American urban children to visit Indigenous villages with all necessary cultural precautions, and Indigenous children to temporarily experience urban life, always with the goal of promoting mutual understanding. The family divided their time between the property in Malibu, which continued to be their sanctuary, an apartment in Los Angeles for days of intense work, and frequent trips to the Amazon region, where Emily maintained contact with her Kanamari family. At first, these visits had been emotionally complex for everyone, but gradually a relationship of mutual respect was established between the girls' 2 families, the biological adoptive one and the one that had raised her during 4 crucial years of her life. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, the family was resting by the lake in Malibu. Michael, now accustomed to turning off his cell phone on weekends, was fishing peacefully while Sarah read a book in the hammock. Emily, a few yards away, was animatedly talking in Kanamari via video call with Tavi, a boy from the village who had become her friend during the annual visits. "We're planning a documentary," she explained later to her parents, joining them for the afternoon snack, "about what it's like to grow up between 2 worlds. Tavi will film the village with the tablet we sent him, and I'll film here. Then we'll put it all together." Michael and Sarah exchanged proud smiles. The frightened girl who had arrived in the United States 4 years earlier, unable to communicate or understand her new environment, had transformed into a confident young woman who not only navigated between different worlds, but actively built bridges to connect them. "I think we did a good job," commented Michael softly to Sarah as they watched Emily feeding the lakefish with bread scraps. Sarah squeezed his hand lovingly. It wasn't just us. It was her too, and all those who loved her along the way, both in the forest and here. Emily turned to them, the wind swaying her golden hair. "You know what's coolest?" she asked, her blue eyes shining with the precocious wisdom that her extraordinary experiences had given her. "It's that we never needed to forget who we were to become who we are." That simple phrase, coming from a child who had lived between such distinct worlds, perfectly summarized the lesson that Michael and Sarah had also learned. True adaptation didn't mean abandoning the past, but integrating it into a present expanded by new possibilities. As the sun began to set over the Malibu Lake, the Thompson-Collins family walked hand in hand back to the house, no longer divided between different worlds, but forming their own world where all aspects of their identities could coexist in harmony. And you, who have followed this journey from the beginning, would you also be able to find beauty in the integration of seemingly contradictory experiences in your own life? How would you handle the need to honor your roots while embracing new possibilities? The story of Emily, Michael and Sarah reminds us that often we don't need to choose between distinct paths. We can create our own trail that incorporates the best of all the worlds we inhabit.